insurance does a government contractor actually need before they can win a contract?
So to be clear, you don't need insurance before you win a contract, but you might be asked for an insurance policy or your actual pending policy as part of your bid proposal. So you could be asked for that, for your insurance limits, at which point in time, if you are awarded and you begin performing, your policy is going to go into effect. So you don't have to have it before that process. But one of the big ones you want to look out for is general liability insurance. This is the most common, and we'll actually see it written in our solicitations. This is primarily for services, and we can see the limits be around 1 million single, 2 million aggregate. That's the amount of coverage. And for anything that I talk about in today's Q&A, feel free to go online or use your favorite AI to input your specific details, your state, your project, whatever. If you want to find out like what it would actually be a range of cost for you, I can't give you that. And also, as a forewarning, I'm not an accountant or a tax person, so we're going to get into that stuff today. But I'm not a professional in those areas, and I highly recommend that you consult a professional in those areas for your specific situation. But again, for this question, general liability, 1 million single, 2 million aggregate is typically what we would see, but you don't need that policy to go into effect until you're awarded. And at the most, you may be asked for that deck page or that initial page for the intent to get coverage as part of your bid proposals. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't.
How much does it actually cost to get bonding for a government contract?
So when it comes to bonding, if you don't know what bonding is, it's another form of insurance typically used for construction projects. And there's different types of bonds. There is the bid bond, there is a payment bond, there's performance bonds. So these are types of insurances that say, the customer, the government could take out and claim your bond. So if you don't follow through on your bid, you don't follow through on paying subs or paying your people, or you don't follow through on performance, and they have to incur a cost to pick up the slack on any of those three areas, they could pull that particular bond, right? Which means the bonding, the surety company is going to pay out. And so that's an upfront cost that you incur. Now, bid bonds, as you build that relationship, you need that to bid, okay? And so there's usually not a cost associated with a bid bond. But a payment bond or performance bond, you're looking around 1% to 3% of the total job, right? And that's a cost that you should include as the cost of your actual performance on the job. That shouldn't be something that's coming out of your profit. That should be one of your expenses that you account for and lean into. So we do get a lot of questions about bonding, and some people kind of get a little geeked out about it. Just know that if you're going to be in the construction business, absolutely, that's something that you need to know. But if you're not and you're primarily in services, bonding is very, very unlikely something that you're going to come across.
How do government contractors pay for a project before the government pays them?
Okay, so we're talking like capital, working capital, and other financial solutions here. The biggest, most common, most helpful financial vehicle that I see is a line of credit. So if you can obtain a line of credit either from a bank or other financial institution, it's going to give you that access to working capital to use it as you need it. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same thing as a loan. Another thing that is talked about in the space is factoring. Factoring. So many misunderstand factoring. And when I was first introduced to it, I also misunderstood it as well. For new government contractors and government contractors that have won their first few contracts, typically factoring is not going to be the solution for you. For any contracts that are below, say, $200,000 or $300,000, factoring is likely also not going to be a solution for you. Factoring is primarily buying an invoice. So they will buy the invoice, they'll put a facility in place with the government customer, pay the government, then as you get paid, you reimburse and pay the factoring company. And they charge you a daily percentage rate, okay? So if you're supposed to get paid by the government in 30 days, but you're not paid for 45 days, that's another 15 days that you're gonna have to pay the factoring company. So It's something that you really need to understand what you're doing, and it's not for low dollar contracts. It's for primarily above simplified acquisition threshold contracts. And that's not even for like base and service contracts. Say it's $300K for 3 or 4 years. Well, per year, it's still going to be a lot less, 50, 70K per year or whatever. They're not going to want to work with you. There's not enough money in it for the factoring companies for that. So we have the line of credit, but then we also have high-end credit cards. This is another kind of great go-to. And some credit card providers also have it so that you can pay your employees via the credit card, and they've got an online portal. So these are all things that they're going to have to be checking your financial credit. So regarding what your credit level is, that's also going to affect your tolerance, your limits, and what availability you have to your financial instruments. But just know that the primary thing that people use is paid when paid payment terms. So I'll say it again, paid when paid payment terms. So as you get paid by the government, you pay whomever, right? Employees, teaming partners, whatever. Employees, more likely you're going to have them on payroll, and you're going to hold that first check, and then the next, if they're being paid every 2 weeks, then they're going to get paid that next check. So you might have 1 or 2 checks that you have to have capital for, or if it's multiple employees, right, you might have to upfront that. So kind of just up to you. But I'm seeing credit cards, lines of credit to be relevant for most people who watch our channel. Factoring is not usually something that I'm recommending.
What taxes should every government contractor expect to pay?
Guys, you have to pay taxes. Okay, if you're winning government contracts, you have to pay taxes. If you're making an income, you have to pay an income tax for starters. Okay, that's how do you pay that? Just like if you have a job or anything else, income tax. There's state income tax, there's federal income tax. So you have to make sure that you are paying your income tax as long as you are profitable in making an income for your business, which you should be doing. Okay. The other tax is sales tax. So if you are procuring goods in particular states, you're performing contracts in different states, you're going to be paying that sales tax just like you would when you go to the store. You're paying that sales tax when you buy the items, the equipment, the materials, the whatever. Okay. That's built into the cost. But if you are doing a sales tax exemption, just make sure that you understand the laws and regulations for the state that you're procuring those in. And then in that instance, you can go online and search for that sales tax exemption and withholding form that you have to send to the contracting officer, and they will typically sign off on that. In some instances, they will even approve that. So that way, when you are presenting your costs, you're not supposed to be charging the government taxes. The government doesn't pay taxes, right? And so the way that can flow down to you, in most states at least, is you have that sales tax exemption form. Now, if you do end up getting employees and having more of a team, okay, don't forget there's also going to be that payroll tax. And at that point, you're definitely going to be working with an accountant. They may also be doing your payroll for you, or it may be a separate entity. But that's when you get into the FICA, FUTA, SUTA, Social Security, the whole song and dance and fun stuff and expensive stuff of payroll tax. So just some initial things to keep in mind, especially the income tax, guys. You got to pay your taxes.
How do you know what minimum wage you're required to pay on a government contract?
Okay, so one thing you want to look for in the solicitations for the bids that you're going after is for a wage determination. Okay, and if it's a service contract, you might see the Service Contract Act, SCA wage, or if it's construction, you might see the Davis-Bacon. So with SCA wage and Davis-Bacon, they're going to give you occupation codes, actual descriptions, labor categories, and then also a rate. That rate, and you have to choose, like you choose like what role, who is working on your contract. So then you line that up with the occupation code, labor category, and then what rate they're supposed to be paid. That's how you know the minimum that you're supposed to pay them. It's you can pay more than that, of course, but if you ever get investigated by the DOL, and they want to know, or if primarily if your employees they're complaining because they're not getting paid enough, it's going to be, okay, what does the wage determination say that you're supposed to be paying them? Now, this is also per county, so it changes per county, And then also in the wage determination, the other important thing is fringe or health and welfare. Okay, so this is when you get into like 2 weeks vacation, paid holidays, all these sorts of things, or just, Davis Bacon is just going to be fringe, and then SEA is going to actually break that out, and you can read what it is. So I encourage everybody, if you're not familiar, to open up your next solicitation or go through the different attachments. Sometimes it's attached separately, and look for the wage determination and try to read it, and you'll see that it's flowing the way that I'm explaining it, and then you know what to look out for. But again, it's the minimum that federal or workers on a federal contract, right? It doesn't have to be federal contract workers. They don't have to be employees of the federal government. Any worker on a federal contract is supposed to be paid these minimum amounts per the wage determination. If there is a wage determination bound to your solicitation, sometimes they're not bound, but that's another story.
Should you start a sole proprietor, LLC, or a S Corp for government contracting?
Okay, again, I'm not your tax professional. I am not a professional designate to be able to tell you what to do or how to structure your business. But what I can do is share how some have structured their business in the past. So, for example, some who are truly self-performing, maybe they set up and got their cage code under their social security number, and maybe they're like the janitorial, worker, the janitor, if you will, on a janitorial contract, and they just win the contract under their name, under their SSN. The reason they won is because they're able to be super competitive on their rates because they don't have a lot of company overhead because it's just them. Then they just go to work every day on a contract. Okay, some people do that. And those people often will set themselves up as just a sole proprietor. Their taxes are not complicated. Everything is just tied to their social security number, like I said, and they don't have a team or a business per se. One of the more common next is the LLC. So one of the big things that an LLC offers is that protection of assets, although with the LLC, it is still tied to you personally when you do your taxes. When you have an LLC, you're paying self-employment tax. Self-employment tax isn't necessarily cheap, but usually folks up to around $50,000 in income are still doing good on the self-employment tax up to around that 50K. Now, when you're making around 80 to 100K and up, usually the self-employment tax is going to be greater than when compared to the tax of an S Corp. So at around 80 to 100K, you will see some businesses set up or transfer over to an S Corp because there is a greater tax savings there. That's what I've seen. That's what I've seen some people do. It is also what I've done with my business, but it's not necessarily what you should do. You should do what your tax and accountant professionals should tell you what you should do, because your situation could be different from these examples that I'm giving. But these are just some examples that I've seen and I've personally lived, and some of those milestone markers along the way that we seem to see what is important when making the decision for what to do.
Bonus question. What's the last show you binge watched?
Sandman. So I'm a big fan of the Sandman. Sadly, unfortunately, they only did 2 seasons because of all the controversy around the creator Neil Gaiman that kind of came out over the last few years. But I absolutely love this show. I love the kind of the dark undertones and the dark themes behind it. I find it super interesting, and for some reason, I highly relate to that. So if there's any Sandman fans out there, definitely comment Sandman down below in the comments on the video. So guys, these are some kind of like hidden costs, know your numbers sorts of things that we're talking about today. None of it really matters though until you're bringing in work to your business, right? Until you have a business, you have a hobby. And the way that you gain business and win contracts is by getting really, really good at writing proposals. It's not something that AI GovCon software is necessarily going to be able to do for you. You need to know what right looks like. And if there's an error that the AI is creating, you're not going to be able to catch that. So use tools as supplements, but at the end of the day, you need to master proposal writing. Anybody in government contracting needs to master proposal writing. Even those who are hiring out eventually bring that in-house. And if, say, you hire a proposal writer, you need to know what they're doing as well. So there's no reason to get away from it. And that's why I created GovRFP, which is my proposal writing system. It's something that I've taught to my students for a number of years, and I've recently refined it because of all the AI advancement in proposal writing. I think there's more important and more emphasis nowadays than ever to actually learn how to write these proposals, as opposed to rely solely on a tool. Use a tool to enhance, but I just, everybody's going AI, and I'm kind of trying to double down on the fundamentals here, because that's never going to go away. And I think it's going to be tested, and I think it's going to become more important than ever. So as my way of thanking you for sticking around to the end of the video, I've released the first few modules of GovRFP totally free. All you need is your email to access those. And you can visit my website, GovKidMethod.com, click GovRFP, unlock those free modules, and you can get in literally right now if it's something that you're wanting to do. I do recommend it for everybody. Now, there's something else that's really, really important, and also coincidentally free resources. So there are some really strong free government contracting websites that every single government contractor needs to be checking out. So there are some free and very powerful and extremely helpful government contracting websites that I recommend for every single government contractor out there. And I just did a video that covers those websites. Check that out. If you are going to be staying on YouTube for a little bit, I highly recommend that video, and that should be on your screen right now. Until next time though, guys, thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to the channel. We're one of the fastest federal contracting YouTube channels here on the platform, and I don't want you to miss future trainings, and I want you to be part of our community here as we continue to grow. So thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, we'll see you in the next one.